Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to give it another minute so that people can filter through. So just bear with us. Okay, well, we might make a start. So on behalf of the Australasian College for Road Safety's local government network, welcome to the webinar this afternoon around speed management for safety. For those that don't know me, my name is Melanie Suter and I'm the chair of the local government network. But I'm also the road safety officer for Parks, Forbes and Lachlan Shire councils, and we're located in the Central West region of New South Wales. If we can flick to the next slide. Yep, that's me. So I'll be looking after you this afternoon. So I just wanted to start with an acknowledgement of country. So we acknowledge and pay our respect to the many First Nations of Australia who continue to be the sovereign custodians of their countries and the sovereignty of the Maori in New Zealand. We acknowledge the ongoing traditional custodians of the lands on which we live, work and learn, and pay our respects to the elders who have passed on the legacy of knowledge and culture to the future generations. May this sharing of knowledge through Matarunga Maori and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander ways of knowing, being and doing guide you with wisdom and courage as it enhances our collective futures. Next slide, please. So for some of you, this might be your first interaction with the local government network. So I just wanted to take a minute to just tell you a little bit about it. So we're still a relatively new network. We're members of the college who are working either directly at the local government level, and we do have passenger members that work for organisations that work with local governments and are interested in what's happening in the road safety space. And those passenger members are people that work at state road jurisdictions, local government associations, they might be consultants, etc. So we're all really just focused on improving road safety outcomes on the local roads. We meet monthly and we celebrate and share our successes. We collaborate on ideas. We have meetings where we can seek help for issues that we might be experiencing. And it's really just an opportunity for all of those practitioners to connect and to know what's going on out there right across the Australasian region. So if you're a member of the college, you do need to opt in to be part of the local government network. So we'd encourage you to do that. And if you're not a member of the college, we'd encourage you to do that too. And then obviously opt in to be part of our network if that sounds like something that you'd like to be involved in. So next slide, please. So today, the webinar will run for around 60 minutes. It is being recorded and you will receive a link to the recording after the event. We will be holding all of your questions until the end of the webinar as well. And on the next slide, thanks, I will tell you how to ask a question. So we'll have 15 minutes at the end for you to ask questions of our four speakers. And you do that by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you'd like to make more general comments, you can put that in the chat function. Next slide, thank you. So as I said, four presenters today that are going to give you some case studies about what they've been doing to manage speed. So our first speaker is from Main Roads, Western Australia. Then we'll hear from Tracy at Goulburn Mulwaree Council in New South Wales. Matt is going to talk from Mornington, Peninsula, Shire Council in Victoria, and we'll hear from Janine from over in our friends over in New Zealand about their speed management guidelines. So enough from me, let's just get into it. So I will hand you over to our first speaker. Next slide, thank you, for Ian, who is the Principal Advisor for the Urban Road Safety Program at Main Roads Western Australia, to give you an overview of their low-cost treatments on roads. Thank you, Ian.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ian Thompson. I'm Principal Advisor for the Urban Road Safety Program. Sorry. Main Roads Western Australia. Here to talk about our low-cost program. This is funded through WA's Road Trauma Trust account, and it's basically aimed at looking at reducing speed and crashes on local roads, making a safer environment for the community. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Sorry, I'm going to jump ahead. Yeah, this gives you, this is what we call the measles map. It gives you all the intersections with one or more casualty crashes. This shows about 4,500 intersections across the metropolitan area. Next slide, please. What's really interesting out of all of that, of the 4,500 where we've got intersection crashes, 3,500 are on local roads. So this has been really the aim of the programme, is to target local roads, which previously main roads hasn't done in the past. Next slide, please. So how did we go about doing this? So we looked at dividing the metropolitan area up into 650 neighbourhood cells. They're defined by the higher order road network. And then we divided the area up into 4 quadrants, which is in the top, which is northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast. We've only got 5 million. I said we only got 5 million. So what we've tried to do is spread that amount equitably across the area. So we put 1.25 million into each of those quadrants. We then looked at determining the fatality and the series of the cross injury in those quadrants, and also we've looked at the pedestrian and cycling activity within those areas. So the ability to walk to shops, schools, parks, bus stops within those areas. We've ranked all of those, and that's given us our ranking for the whole of the metropolitan area. Next slide, please. So just going back to that in a little bit more detail, we've got the neighbourhood cells in figure A, divided by the hierarchical road network. We worked out the casualty crash bias for each of those cells. Anything below 1 didn't get scored or isn't part of the programme, and everything above 1 is above. So, and then below that is just to reaffirm the activity attributes. So looking at schools, public transport, parks, we've ranked those, and then we've combined those together to get an overall score, which is more about the community. Whilst we do look at light industrial areas, it's more about the residential areas that we've looked at. Next slide, please. So just to reaffirm, this is a low-cost road safety on an area-wide or whole-of-street basis. So what the programme really is about is not targeting individual intersections, it's targeting an area-wide and looking at those. So you might have an area of 9 intersections, and if 3 of those have got crashes, we'll probably target all 9. So it's targeting those high risks of the likelihood of crashes occurring in those areas as well. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, funding, we've only got, well, we have 5 million, which is really good. Main roads is 100% funding the construction and the design, if the design has to go out to external consultants. And that's bearing in mind that local government don't always have the resources to undertake the design. What we're asking for from local government is the buy-in. So the buy-in in terms of doing the pre and post counter data collection, doing the consultation with the public at large, and the procurement of the construction process. Next slide, please. So this is just sort of the typical sort of type of treatments that we've implemented. In the top left, the mini roundabouts in North Perth, we put 9 intersections in close proximity where we put mini roundabouts in. They cost about, at the time, they cost about 20k an intersection. Then in the middle, we've got the Osborne Park roundabouts, which are slightly larger, compact roundabouts, we call them. This is in light industrial area. The cost of those are about 25k. And then we've got the race safety platforms that we did in a residential area in Jundana. If you notice, just on the race safety platforms, we've got a slightly different road marking on there. This has moved away from the piano keys, and we've called these, it's more of a shark's tooth that we've called this. We've only identified it on the approach side to each of the entrances to the platform. This is partly because some of the feedback we've had from local government is that people are mistaking the piano keys for crossings, and therefore have been stepping out into the road environment whilst cars are coming, thinking cars will give way, and causing pedestrian and car conflict. Next slide, please. Other types of treatments we've introduced are the bow tie, which is a diagonal road closure effectively with a gap through for cycling, and some more mini roundabouts that we did in South Perth. Next slide, please. Treatments that we haven't installed but want to install are gateway treatments as the entry into these areas. If we're doing an area-wide approach, mid-block treatments, which are really critical in terms of slowing the speed down along the whole length of the road, and pinch points, slow points. Wombat crossing treatments, again, we're looking to try and get those with shark's teeth markings. Road diets, narrowing the roads down, and coloured road surfacing treatments, which from international research seems to be quite effective in reducing speeds, and like to try those around a school environment with school buy-in. Next slide, please. So just going back to some of the areas that we've treated. In City of Stirling, we did Osborne Park, we did race safety platforms and compact roundabouts. This reduced the speed in those areas, particularly in Jundana, below the 50-kilometre posted speed limit. So somewhere between 47 and 44 kilometres an hour through the residential area. Osborne Park is probably an exception. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the longitudinal distance between intersections, people can still speed. So we found that Osborne Park, the speeds were slightly above along the between intersections was slightly above at 53k, but actually through the roundabout, because these were giveaway and straight throughs, we've actually changed driver behaviour. So through the roundabout, the speeds are around about 32 kilometres an hour. And what you've basically created is a four-way giveaway. So people are actually slowing down on the approach, going through with caution, either making an attempt or going around the roundabout. Yep, occasionally people do go across because they're fairly flat, but they seem to be effective in terms of reducing the potential for crashes in those locations. Next slide, please. So this is just to highlight those 4 roundabouts that we put in. Those are the yellow dots. Just the before and after speeds, you can see there's been quite a significant reduction in the speeds through those areas, particularly because of previously they were a through and a giveaway on the sides. We've also managed to get the G-force, which demonstrates the braking speeds on the approach to those intersections, which has really been impacted. Next slide, please. I'm going to have to miss it. Yeah, more of the same. Mini roundabouts in the city of Vincent, Norfolk Street roundabout, raised safety platforms. The average speed through those areas have reduced below the posted speed limit to about 40 kilometres an hour. Next slide, please. Again, City of Rockingham, raised safety platforms. Majority of the speeds there are below 50k. There is an exception just across where the Hourglass Reserve Park is. That's increased slightly. That's probably because there's not enough platforms through that area, so it's a lessons learned. Next slide, please. What we've also said is putting in these measures will give you a 40k kilometre area-wide zone. So Mount Lawley in the city of Stirling was the first that was introduced in February this year. Next slide, please. That's just to highlight the area-wide scheme that we did in Mount Lawley. Next slide, please. So some of the things that we've had, positive feedback from the community, speeds lower than the 85th percentile posted speed. Osborne Park was the exception. However, through using compass data, which is Bluetooth data, we've actually got the speeds below 35 kilometres. Next slide, please. We've also provided detailed drawings for local government to use in terms of doing the design for these. So we've got a mini roundabout. Next slide. The platform, raised safety platform. Next slide, please. The wombat crossings. Next slide. We've introduced an implementation framework document so that to help LGAs and the public, so they've got something they can view. This is on Main Road's website that people can view and look at. It helps to inform and give an idea of the type of treatments you can use. Next slide, please. The overall programme is having independent evaluation done through the Western Australian Research Innovation Programme using ARB. Next slide, please. It's had some recognition with a few awards. Next slide, please. And thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Ian. So that was a great example of some treatment options to manage speed. So now we're going to move ahead to our next speaker, who is Tracy, who's going to give us a different approach to speed. So this is about community engagement and collaboration. So Tracy is the Road Safety and Traffic Officer at Goulburn Mulwaree Council in New South Wales. So I will hand it over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Mel. As Mel said, I'm the Road Safety and Traffic Officer from Council, been in this position for 10 years. Can you just do the next slide, please? Just to give you a bit of background on Goulburn, this is our iconic Rambo. He's probably the most photographed ram in the whole of Australia, possibly the front as well as the back, because he is full. We actually light him up every year for National Road Safety Week. So we're 2 hours south from Sydney and an hour north from Melbourne, and hour north from Canberra. The Hume Highway transverses through the whole of the local government area from Goulburn. Speed is one of the main contributing factors in on the Hume Highway. So it is being a state road, there's not much we can do about it, but the downside of that is that it does take up a lot of our local highway patrols from our local roads. Population of Goulburn's about 32,000, and we're predominantly a rural area with a city in the middle. Land use is agricultural, mainly sheep, as you can see by Rambo, and a few cattle around. We also have the New South Wales Police Academy, the New South Wales Police Driver Training, and a maximum security jail. So we balance it out pretty much that way. The council manages 1,250 kilometres of rural road network, 250 is urban, and 1,000 kilometres is rural roads. The next slide, please. So this is just a small speed project that I'm presenting on today. It's a community engagement speed project. So I have back one, please. Thank you. I have 2 speed trailers which I deploy throughout the year. I don't really have a schedule. I work on the community to help me where they are deployed. So if somebody rings up and says somebody's speeding in my street, I can deploy the trailer out there. And it shows it's a really good community engagement tool because it shows that we're actually caring about what they're saying. So it's actually capped at 25 kilometres over the speed limit. So if it's a 50k speed limit, it'll show up to 75k's and then it'll actually blank out. It will still actually collect the data, but it just deters people from having speeding games with them. So I deploy them for a period of 2 months on each road or street that I deploy them at, so I can get some average data for it. So once they're out there for the first week or 2, you get the feedback of, people think, oh, gee, I've just been caught speeding, or, I'll slow down. But after the month, they don't receive anything, and it becomes just part of the infrastructure. They revert back to their normal behaviour. So you get an average good speed data out of that. And the feedback from the community is usually really good. Like the kids go, oh, Dad got a grumpy face today, but Mum got a smiley face. So, it's getting into the kids' minds as well. So they're in the backseat going, you really need to get a smiley face, Mum or Dad. So that's really good. So next slide, please. So I also work very closely. We've got an amazing highway patrol group here. So I work closely with them. So if they know of a road or a street that there's an issue in, I can schedule them to be deployed there. This will enable to get some data on where the actual speeding is taking place, and we can also use that data for grants for future infrastructure if needed, if the speeding is needed. So the data, as I said, is collected and passed on to the local police, and also used at local traffic committee, and can be passed on to Transport for New South Wales if needed. So I have 2 of these trailers. I can either deploy them 1 on each street, or if it's a long stretch of road and there's an issue, I can put 1 either end of the road. So the speed cameras, the speed trailers actually collect data that in both directions, but it only shows the speed in one direction. Next slide, please. So this is what some of the data actually looks like. As you can pull a plethora of data graphs off these things. They're amazing. So I just choose to show a couple today. So this is your average speed. So this is in a 50 kilometre speed zone over the 2-month period. And as you can see, the average speed, people are pretty much doing the right thing. So, you know, it's a 50k zone, and I can't actually see what the speed is up there, but you can see that the average people are in both directions doing the right thing under 50 kilometres an hour. Next slide, please. So this is the maximum speed. So just be mindful, this is exactly the same position as the last one was. So in the incoming direction, you can see that the maximum speed was 135 kilometres and the outgoing direction was 148 kilometres. Now, that might be an emergency vehicle, but be mindful that it is a 50k zone and it's highly unlikely that these guys are doing that in the middle of the street. But it gives you some idea of if there is people speeding and how many are there and what's the maximum speed. Next slide, please. So it can also give you speed by percentage. So the lower speeds could mean that it's actually on an intersection. So people are pulling up to, you know, on the road. There's an intersection that comes in, a feeder road that comes in. So they're pulling up and they're slowing down to come into that road as well. So I've actually had kids on bikes that have actually been playing with them on numerous occasions to see how fast they can go. That can mess with your speed data. And I had one out at a little village called Talong, and I asked the gentleman where I placed it there, I asked him to, you know, they own the house. I said, can you keep an eye on it? And he said, yeah, I was very proud to do that. And he said he rang me one day, he said at 3:40 every afternoon, it goes off at 80 kilometres an hour. And I'm like, and he said, there's no cars around, there's nobody. So I went out there and I had a look at it, right as wrong, 3:40, 80 Ks. And I looked around and there was a train line that was like 100 metres away. So I was picking up that train every single time. So be mindful that it can mess with your data, but it still sort of averages out in the long run. Next slide, please. So this can also give you a data by half hour. So it gives you the number of vehicles that go through every half hour, the average speed and the maximum speed. This is really good because we actually had an issue with between 4 and 5 o'clock on this road that we were getting these really high speeds on a 50k road with the data that came back. It is actually a rat run for the McDonald's over the back hill, but there is a school there and there's a dog park and there's a lot of people around. So we were concerned. So the police went down and they sat there, and right or wrong, I think they got 6 P-platers that were finishing school and heading back over the hill and just, you know, doing the speeds that they shouldn't have been doing. So, but it was a good community engagement tool because once the word got out that the police were sitting there, then it got through all the 5 schools here that, you know, when you're doing your rat run to Maccas, you probably need to do the speed limit. So that was a good outcome with that one. Next slide, please. So just a quick evaluation of the program. They are like 16,000 each, so they're quite a cheap community engagement tool, but you can use them for other things, like you get the data off them and you can deploy them pretty much anywhere, except for out on some roads where they may have their tyres stolen and stuff like that. They're easy enough to move around. I do them myself. Just grab one of the guys from work, we hook it up to my car, we move it around, download the data, change the speeds, all that sort of stuff. It's really easy to use. As I said, it's a really good community engagement tool with the community. It's letting you show that they care, that you care about them. You're not just fobbing them off saying, no, no one's speeding. It's, you know, no. They're all ringing up saying, yeah, we all have those people that say, I want a speed bump put in my, you know, street. And they go, you know, you don't want a speed bump put in the street because it'll be do-don't all day. So it's showing them that we actually care. It's helping the police with their enforcement, where they can deploy their police to enforce if there is a speeding issue. Mind you, I've had these trailers for 6 years and I've only had 2 places where the 85th percentile were doing over the speed limit over the 2 months. It also helps council to investigate issues with infrastructure if there is a speeding problem there, whether we do put chicanes in the street or look at roundabouts or stuff like that. As I said again, leaving them out for 2 months, it gives you that average speed because people do once they see them flash in their face, they're new, they slow down, and then they revert back to their old original behaviour. And the data, it can be used for local traffic committee, and it's really great for grant infrastructure. So if you've got a speeding problem there, you can actually use that for future grant infrastructure. And back to you, Mel. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. If we can flick to the next slide, thanks. We'll keep moving. So our next speaker is Matt McQuinn, who is the Traffic and Transport Engineer at Mornington, Peninsula Shire Council in Victoria. Matt is going to present to you on an award-winning project, but I'll let him tell you all about that. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Mel. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, presenting from a different location than expected, rather than Mornington, Peninsula, Victoria, in Canberra today for the Australian Road Safety Awards, which fortunately, yeah, we won 2 awards, one of which is there, hard to see. But yeah, quite timely that it's actually in relation to this project. So yeah, all sort of happening in one day, all on the same project, which is good but busy. So yeah, let's get into it. So as yeah, Mel said, I'm Matt McQuinn, one of Mornington Peninsula Shire's traffic and transport engineers. I'm going to be talking about our Safer Speeds on Rural Roads project as an example of a systemic batch approach to management of risk on high-risk roads. In terms of speed limits, despite all levels of government agreeing about the relationship between speed limit and road trauma, with relatively small changes in or decreases in vehicle speed, resulting in disproportionately high reductions in road trauma. Still, widespread and significant implementation of appropriate speed limits to improve road safety, it's been a tough nut to crack, particularly for local government. On the next slide, for anyone who doesn't know where Mornington Peninsula is, we're about an hour southeast of Melbourne, a relatively large municipality with high visitation, particularly during summer, with a mix of sort of urban environments around our townships and rural sort of between our townships and throughout a substantial part of the peninsula. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the Mornington Peninsula has unacceptably high levels of road trauma. We've experienced the equal highest number of deaths of any of Victoria's 79 municipalities, with 64 deaths 2014 to 2021. And over 1,300 serious injuries, which have devastating impacts to people's lives and the lives of their families. For many years, we've sought to be proactive in road safety, such as adopting Towards Zero vision in 2016 and our Safe System Aligned road safety strategy. Next slide, please. Speed management can be a somewhat divisive topic. It needn't necessarily be, at least to the extent that some think. And really, appropriate speed limits aren't the be-all, end-all in road safety, but it is one of, or part of, getting the basics right. It's a matter of kinetic energy, reaction time, braking distances, and human tolerance and vulnerability. Even at legal speeds, your speeds aren't appropriate. The cornerstone of our road safety strategy is to match speed limits with the infrastructure and road safety features of roads to reduce the likelihood of crashes occurring, and if they do occur, so that they don't result in death and serious injury. Within the Mornington Peninsula, we have rural roads that have traditionally had 100 km/h speed limits for many years, such as in the photo on that slide, with many having high crash risk, such as narrow lanes, large trees close to the road, and other obstacles like that, where a simple mistake could easily result in death or a serious injury. After around 10 years of trying to implement 80 km/h on all of our high-risk, high-speed rural roads, in 2012 we got partway there with a compromised outcome due to political influence, you could say, with 5 changed to 80 and 10 changed to 90, but it was a step in the right direction. Over the years, fortunately, we've had a number of similar state-managed rural roads also reduced to 80. Next slide, please. With current road safety knowledge, we know that roads like the one on the left are suitable for 90 and 100, but roads like the one on the right aren't and are suitable for a maximum of 80 km/h. And of course, as anyone who works in local government knows, it's not financially feasible to upgrade roads like the one on the right to look like the one on the left. As an example of the risk on these sort of roads, is a head-on collision at 100 kilometres per hour is almost guaranteed to result in a death. At 80, it's about 80 kilometres per hour, it's about 30 or 40%, and at 70 k's, it's about 10%. So, yeah, getting that speed down a bit can really make a big difference to the survivability of crashes. Slide, please. Since our 2012 project, we've still been trying to get the remaining 33 roads down to 80 kilometres per hour. And we've been trying across the whole period for over 20 years. Within the sort of 20-year period, there've been 32 people killed, 280 people seriously injured, and 487 people with minor injuries during that time. And in 2019 alone, we had 6 deaths on these 33 roads. So essentially, enough was enough, and a more drastic approach was needed. With a traditional approach of applying for speed limits one by one, it can take a very long time, with each road potentially taking up to 2 years, depending on the systems that are in place in Victoria, in the case of Department of Transport and Planning at the time. More innovative approach that's more in line with safe system is to assess the risk across a certain type of road and implement a safe speed limit across all of those roads at once, rather than a sort of slower road by road approach. So really, it's based on risk rather than crashes, regardless of whether there's crashes on the road. The risk is still clear. It's just luck or chance that there hasn't been crashes on those roads, and that happened on other roads of a similar type. So in 2019, our mayor at the time, Councillor David Gill, approached the Age newspaper regarding our inappropriate speed limits, which resulted in pretty quick negotiations with politicians and Department of Transport and Road Safety Victoria. And a 2-year trial was approved of 80 kilometre per hour speed limits on 33 roads, which he rolled out on 110 kilometres of road within about 5 weeks. Next slide is a map of the 33 roads. It's giving an idea of where they are. They're sort of spread across the peninsula. And now we don't have any Shire managed 90 or 100 kilometre per hour roads remaining. As far as we're aware, it's the largest local government-led speed limit correction project this type in Victoria. It's been a really positive step in making our roads safer. Next slide, please. It has created a fair bit of media interest over the time, as well as interstate and overseas as well. In terms of the evaluation on the next slide, given that the 80k speed limits were a trial, evaluation was an important part in including community sentiment, vehicle speeds, and road trauma, which was reported in, or the results reported in 2022. And it was a comprehensive evaluation with Road Safety Victoria leading as part of the deal of it being a trial. Summary of outcomes on the next slide is that the changes had a high level of community support, vehicle speeds reduced, and road trauma reduced. This included considering any effects that COVID-19 movement restrictions might have had on the results as well. So next slide, a quick summary of the community sentiment. We did a random representative sample of our community of over 1,000 people, which is sort of considered best practice. And it was done about 12 months after the speed limits were done, so relative to the normally done before, which is innovative and a comprehensive way to do it. The headline stat there is that almost 3 times as many people supported the change as didn't, with 59% support, 22% opposed, which goes a fair way to debunking the common perception that implementation of appropriate speed limits would be viewed negatively by the broader community. There's lots of other insights through that survey as well, such as people thought it would reduce road trauma and that the speed limit should be made permanent. In terms of vehicle speeds on the next slide, vehicle speeds reduced more on higher volume roads and higher again on roads that had the highest before speeds. A lot of the roads already had speeds below the posted speed limit, but the ones that were higher reduced by more, with now more than 60% travelling 80 k's or less, which is a much safer limit on these roads. We expect compliance to continue to improve over time as people get more and more used to it. A brief example on the next slide is a histogram of speed, so frequency on the left, speed on the bottom. So this is one of the roads, Tybee Road, where the mean dropped from 92 to 81. You can really see how it's condensed around that red vertical line of 80 Ks, and it's also shifted a lot to the left. So there's just a whole lot of less kinetic energy occurring on that road every day that would cause less harm if a crash did occur, and also reduce the likelihood of a crash occurring. In terms of road trauma, on the next slide, we had a net 20% reduction in road trauma, 68% reduction on our roads, and comparing to a 48% reduction on control roads. It's in line with predicted reductions based on the vehicle speed change that we saw. Unfortunately, there's been no fatalities in the 3.5 years following the implementation of the 80k speed limits, relative to 6 involving these roads in 2019 alone. We will also be monitoring this in the longer term as well. So, but very promising results at this stage. Just to round off with a few seconds left, some of the things that have contributed to the trial getting off the ground, being successful, going through the evaluation and post-evaluation reporting the results, is having a road safety vision. In our case, that was towards 0, and having aligning ourselves with the state government in that they'll support us because we're aligned to the same vision as them. Working internally and externally with different stakeholders, support from officer level all the way up to CEO and councillors, being strategic about what you're trying to achieve, basing everything on engineering evidence and communicating that effectively, being prepared so that when opportunities come up that you're ready to implement, put the resources in when needed, and persistence as well as collaboration with the state agencies. So in conclusion, on the last slide, we believe this project's shown of what's possible with speed management as an alternative to a road-by-road approach, and it's also supported our thinking of, even when some people think it's not possible or it's not gonna, it's just never going to work, it's still potentially worth pushing it and implementing some of those success factors I talked on the previous slide to keep pushing, because you never know when something might get across the line. So yeah, we're seeing sort of the wider influence of this project a bit, and yeah, just talking to a road safety expert here at the awards, working on 1,300 kilometres, 130k speed limits in Iran, believes there's some good learnings from this project to help with that as well. So yeah, we hope to see a lot more of it. We hope it's easy or easier for other councils, and it can happen all over Australia for the benefit of road safety, and something that should be obvious and not controversial. So thanks for your time. Last slide, if you like any more information, yeah, if you just Google Mornington Peninsula safest speeds, it will come up there. Thanks for your time, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And I think on behalf of everyone on the line today, congratulations on your award wins today, for everyone at Mornington that's been involved in this project. So we'll keep moving. So our final speaker today is Janine Stewart from Waka Kotahi, the New Zealand Transport Agency, who's going to walk us through the new speed guidelines in New Zealand and some of the work that the area program managers have been doing with local governments. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Mel, and kia ora from New Zealand, and congratulations, Matt. That's a really great award that you've just won there. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our story about our Road to Zero local road programme, what we've been doing with local authorities. Next slide, please. So, and next slide. So briefly, we will be talking about the New Zealand Road to Zero strategy, the tools that guide us, the new rule that came into play last year, the speed management guide, and I'll also share a couple of local success stories as well. So next slide, please. So we have a real problem in our roads, as you can see from the numbers here. We're presently sitting 5th from the bottom of the table of OECD countries, with 7.1 deaths per 100,000 population. That compares to similar sized countries such as Norway and Iceland that have 2. So we have a Road to Zero target of 40% reduction in DSIs over the next 10 years. Half of this target will be achieved by addressing speed and infrastructure. So there are around 100,000 kilometres of road across New Zealand. 11,000 of those are operated by and managed by Waka Kotahi state highways, and the other approximately 87,000 kilometres are managed by the local authorities. So we carried out some strategic modelling which showed that in order to achieve our Road to Zero targets, we would need to spend around $5 billion over 10 years. And we realised that half of that spend was actually on the local roads. So the area programme manager role was created so that we could work more closely with our local authority partners to co-design a programme for speed and infrastructure in line with safe system principles that will help reach our Road to Zero targets. Next slide, please. So this shows our local road team across the country. There are presently 5 of us, but there's another 6 staff that support us in our work. And we work with 67 local authorities across the Motu. Next slide, please. So the strategic model, which we call the pipeline development tool, was developed so that we could see spatially where our highest risk corridors and intersections were across the country. This was a bit of a game changer for us and for our local partners, as it was the first time they could see the risk on their networks with an estimated DSI saving, estimated costs and potential interventions that could be implemented. Next slide, please. So this is the pipeline development tool. So area programme managers held over 250 workshops with local authority partners to show what the Road to Zero strategic programme is highlighting on their network and to verify what the tool was telling us. And we actually managed to get a really high alignment rate with about 85%. So we work with our partners continually to ensure that they're delivering interventions that are based on safe system principles. Next slide, please. The MegaMaps tool was developed some years ago to help assess where the safe and appropriate speeds are on the network. The layers show the current posted speed limits, infrastructure road risk assessment layers, mean operating speeds. It has crash analysis data in there, and it's recently been updated for the Road to Zero edition to include our One Network framework, which is focused around movement in place, which is a new philosophy that we have introduced recently. So the model's algorithm then calculates the safe and appropriate speeds across the network. Local authorities are using this tool when creating their speed management plans, and it's been really, really useful for them when they go to speak to elected members and show the proposed speed limits on their network. They can show that it's evidence-based and it's not them just wanting to do things, off their own bat. Next slide, please. So while we were working with our partners on delivering the Road to Zero programme, our new speed management rule came into force last May. It had actually been delayed about a year because of the pandemic. So the new rule contains some fundamental changes intended to enable faster speed management planning and implementation. This included the removal of the bylaw process for councils, which was both cumbersome and expensive for them, and effectively meant that councils didn't bother doing any speed management because it was just too difficult. So although the councils still have to consult on their speed management plans, now they just have to send the plans through to our Director of Land Transport, who certifies the plan if it aligns with the rule. Once the plans are certified, the speed limits are entered into a new National Speed Limit Register, which has been created, which becomes the one source of truth for speed limits around the country and is open to the public to view. Importantly, the rule also states that all councils should make best efforts to have 40% of their schools with a safe and appropriate speed around them by the end of June 2024, and they must have 100% by the end of 2027. It also asks for and requires regional speed management planning, and that was to ensure consistency when travelling through the regions, because every district was doing their own thing and it became a bit confusing for drivers. Next slide, please. So the speed management guide, that was completely rewritten from the previous version that we had. And that's really to give our local authorities as much information as possible for them when they're drafting their speed management plans in light of this new rule that has just been put in place. A recent survey of our local authorities showed that there's been really, really positive feedback on the guide, and they are using it, they are finding it useful and easy to use. It's a principle-based approach and adopts a fundamental shift in terms of the focus on movement and place, as I mentioned, in contrast to the previous framework, which was much more vehicle-centric. Safe system principles are also at the heart of this guide. There are also a number of appendices that provide more detail on other topics, for example, how to do comms and engagement, how to do engagement with Maori, monitoring and evaluation and technical advice. I should also add that with the role, one of the main changes was the focus on early engagement with Maori, that you have to do that. You have to show evidence that you have done that before you do anything. Next slide, please. So we like to show off on behalf of our local partners and share the good work that's being done. We're constantly on the lookout for good news stories, and we publish them wherever we can. We have our Road to Zero newsletter that goes out to over 1,000 stakeholders, and we often put our local authority partners in there. We highlight compact roundabouts, we highlight race safety platforms, we highlight speed management planning, just to share information and for other councils to have a look and see and inspire what they can do as well. So we all know, I think all of us have known in this world how difficult it is and how challenging speed management can be. And 4 years ago, I would never have had this conversation ever in New Zealand about speed management planning. But at this point in time, we've got 12 councils have already had their speed management plan certified through the new process. And we have 64 councils that are either engaging, drafting or consulting on their speed management plans. So that's fairly much every council in the country is effectively working on the speed management plans. So we're hoping, and we will see, a dramatic shift in the next few months once those speed limits start being implemented. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a success story about speed in Auckland. A few years ago, they had a real crisis in road safety. They had a real upswing in deaths and serious injuries. So they decided, obviously, they needed to do something about that. So they've already carried out some monitoring on their last 2 tranches of speed management. And as you can see from there, it's had spectacular results, actually, for the 830 kilometres of speed change. They're showing a prevention of 14.5 deaths and serious injuries. So the Auckland board has just signed off on the 3rd tranche of speed management in Auckland, which will mean once that's implemented, 65% of Auckland's network will be at a safe and appropriate speed. So they have done so well in there. Next slide, please. So just another one. We can show many of these projects, but I thought I'll put in a speed one, I'll put in an infrastructure one. This is one of my councils that I deal with in Taupo. It came about from a media article in the press that I picked up from the mayor of Taupo, who said that a particular intersection, which used to be a state highway, had been revoked. It was showing that there'd been a huge increase in crashes. So I contacted the council, we worked with them, we put in, they put in a compact roundabout platforms and other safety treatments. And we did a recent analysis and showing that since March 2022, 0 crashes at this intersection. And I honestly could replicate that story right throughout the whole country. This has been a real success story. So I could talk for hours on this subject, but I think I'm running out of time now. So I think that's it for my presentation. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Janine. So we might just, if I can get all the panelists to turn their cameras back on, and we will work through some of the questions that we've got in the Q&A, and there's some also in the chat. So I might just direct some traffic. So first one to you, Ian. What's the approximate cost of the raised safety platform with shark's teeth?
So I just having a problem with the video, but the raised platforms are about 25k at the moment, but sorry, about 25k. One of the issues that we have got is there's an increase in material cost. So they're probably around about 35, 40k at the moment.
Great, thank you. One for you, Tracy. Has there been any long-lasting changes in behaviour on the particular streets where the trailers were located, or have you had a halo effect that diminished after they were removed?
So pretty much, as I said, the 85% I were doing the correct thing. If there were a couple of big speeds in there, the police were down there and they pretty much caught them every single time. So they are where they weren't, where they were doing over the percentile, sorry, the police were just sitting down there deploying them. And then they regularly come and sit there on a regular basis because they know there's an issue there.
Awesome, thank you. Another question about the trailers while I'm looking at them. Have you had any issues with vandalism with the trailers?
I try to just deploy them in town if they do go out of town. I know when I do deploy them, I try and put them in front of people's places like properties and stuff like that and ask them to keep an eye on them, and they're usually pretty good. They're pretty chuffed. I did have them out the back over Owen Ford and lost the tyres and the wheels and everything like that, so they're not going back out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, other than that, I haven't had any problems with them.
Yeah, great. One for you, Matt. Did you have to increase the level or number of signs that you had out?
So some of the roads were posted 90, some are posted 100, and some are default 100. So Victoria, in a non-built up area, if there's no signage, it's default 100. So we signed it to meet the current speed zone guidelines, which none of the roads would have met under previous. So yeah, there's generally sign, then a repeater within 100 or 200 metres, another one, and then it's every few Ks after that. So it's a lot more signage than there used to be, which is good and probably just helps reinforce people understand. And also at major side roads as well, where people turn in. So everyone should know what the speed limit is. It shouldn't be an excuse to not know.
Yeah. Follow-on one for you, was police enforcement part of that program, and has it continued since the signs have gone up?
We tried to stay out of that, which I think is a good thing on our end. So we didn't want to, because the trial came around so quickly in terms of that political involvement, we had basically 5 weeks to get it all into the state system, ticked off, signs ordered, worked out where they need to go, installed, checked before Christmas. So there wasn't a lot of time for extensive community engagement beforehand. So we wanted to be clear with basically deal with it with frequently asked questions. And so that we could be clear on our role, and people asking, is this a revenue raising exercise? We could say revenue enforcement is a police issue. That's nothing to do with us. So we didn't ask for enforcement or say don't enforce to give a grace period. We just let the police do what they think was fit. And I believe they enforced relatively quickly. And yeah, that has helped. And we were aware of some people have lost their license for going so far over the speed limit. So it's been supported by enforcement. It probably dropped during COVID with other things they had to do. But I think it's just enforced in line with their normal sort of enforcement regime. I don't have up-to-date stats, but yeah, it's probably a good point. It would be interesting to know if it's the same or less or more than previous.
Ooh. Janine, one for you. How has the recent approach targeting the top 1% of high-risk roads with speed management affected the 40% reduction target by 2030?
Yeah, good question. So this relates to change of PM that we had earlier in the year. The directive was that we would only do 1% of a high risk on the state highways. It caused a bit of a wobble in my local authority world. We were getting asked, do we have to do that? And the resounding answer was no. You guys keep on keeping on. And as I said, the 87,000 kilometres on local roads compared with 11,000 on the state highway. The local authorities are just going to nail it. They're just carrying on. So, and the state highway plan, a lot of that was focusing on the maraes, the townships, the schools anyway. So I'm hoping it won't make that much of a difference, because we're really strongly relying on our local authorities to get that speed reduction down. Thanks.
Awesome. I saw a question for all of you, which I'd love to put to all of you. Okay, so it's, have you found that any subsets of drivers that these treatments appear to be less effective in reducing speeding behaviours? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. So in Goulburn, there's the ones that don't have their driver's license, the speed cameras don't affect them at all. So but other than that, with my speed project, it's very, very popular with the kids, as I said, and the families. So you get the kids in the back seat going like that. So, but yeah, with the enforcement side of it, no.
Matt, just pick on you. I'll just direct traffic.
Yeah, we haven't specifically collected data on that, but generally we see younger drivers, particularly males, and even sometimes not so young males. And it was probably, I can't remember the exact stats, but with our community sentiment work, it was probably the cohorts that were probably less supportive were probably more those younger males. Just, yeah, I guess that's just the way it is for whatever reason.
Yep. Ian?
Yeah, we haven't collected any data as such on that, but what we can say is from the speed data that we've collected, we've definitely made a difference in slowing the speeds down through the residential areas, slightly different in the industrial area, but the speed through the intersections have certainly reduced. So yeah, made a difference.
Yep. Janine?
Yeah, not really. I was just thinking about Hamilton City, who've been putting in raised platforms willy-nilly, not willy-nilly, but they've been putting a lot in over the last few years, have done some recent research on 4 that they had put in, and I'm very happy to share that on behalf of Hamilton City, because it really does show the difference in speed reduction that they're getting on those. And there hasn't really been a lot of pushback on those, to be honest. I think people are, they have the grade right, so that it's actually quite, I think they use the Ostrode's grading, so 1 in 15, I think it is. So you're gentle on the, a bit steeper on the up and gentle on the out. So no, to answer the question, it's been fine. It's been accepted.
Janine, are the speed management plans available publicly?
Yes, if you look on our Waka Kotahi website, if you Google certified speed management plans, you'll find the plans that have already been certified on there. And actually that's one of the things that we're quite keen to do, that when we put the plans up, we're making sure that they're really good plans, so that people are copying good plans. So yeah, have a look at that. Yeah.
Okay, trying to smash through the rest of them. Ian, what's the maximum design speed for the raised platforms?
We haven't got a maximum design speed. It's just some data that we're trying to establish. So we're trying to use Bluetooth data to collect that to determine what the speeds are through. So unfortunately, I don't have any data exactly on that.
Oh, there was a question about that too.
Was a question about the ramps?
Oh, something about Bluetooth. Is there a reason why you decided to use Bluetooth data to track speed limits?
Yeah, one of the reasons for the use of Bluetooth data is because with tubes, you can't get actually close up to the roundabouts due to braking forces. With this Bluetooth data, we can actually check the braking force and the speed and direction through the roundabout. So that's really a big advantage. And that we can do that now on the platforms and other mini roundabouts to assess the safety factors.
Yep. One for you, Tracy. How much roadside space is required to fit the trailer?
They basically just fit in a car space. So if it's close and parallel parking, you can just sit them on there. If it's in a rural town, I just put them on the verge in front of somebody's house. Always go and knock on the door, say, is it okay? Can you mow around it? They sit up quite high so people can get under and nip a snip if they want to do that. So that's it. It's just basically a very small trailer.
Yep. Another one back to you, Ian. How do the raised safety platforms at intersections impact heavy vehicles and bus movements?
Well, we've in terms of the heavy vehicles, we've just put some in light industrial areas, so we're waiting for the impacts of those or reports back on those. In terms of the buses, we've discussed this with the PTA, so we've come up with the design for bus routes no more than 75 mil in terms of the height.
Excellent. And I'm getting the hurry up that we're at time. So if we didn't get to your question, I will give it to the presenters and we will put it out in the alert when we do our wrap up of the webinar today. So if we can go to the next slide, thanks. So big thank you to all of you for dialing in today, and to our wonderful 4 presenters for sharing their knowledge and the case study of the work that they've been doing to manage speed in their jurisdiction. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, if you're not already a member of the college, we'd love you to join. And if you're not a member of the network, you haven't opted in, please do that. That's the email address that you need to get in contact with. And if we just go to the next slide, these are the next events that are coming up for local government network members. So you do need to be a member of the network to attend the next roundtable. So we'll be doing a bit more of a deeper dive into some of these speed management strategies and case studies we've talked about today. So that's on the 12th of July. The Eventbrite link is already live if you wanted to register for that. So thank you, everybody, and you can head back and have a productive day. Thank you.
Thank you.